Hi there, in this week's video I'm going to show you how to sharpen chisels. So let's say you've just brought some new chisels and you want to know how to sharpen them. You're going to need to sharpen them because they do come pretty sharp out of the box, but they're not going to be perfect. They're not going to be the best you can get out of them. Even if you've got cheap chisels, sharpening them will make them much better. And anyway, they're going to get blunt over time, so you're going to need to know how to sharpen them. Luckily for you, my chisels are pretty blunt at the minute, so let's sharpen them together. Now there are a few things you're going to need, and there are many ways you can do this, but I'm going to show you in this video pretty much, I want to say, the simplest way that I can think of doing it in a way that's going to be repeatable. So I think the most important thing to note when sharpening chisels or sharpening anything really is to choose a technique and perfect that technique and stick with that one technique. Okay, let's look at the first step. Okay, so this is my grinder. As you can see, I've got a little table here and I've got a grinding stone on here. The grinding stone is probably not the best stone to have, but it's the way I've perfected this technique. It doesn't really matter what stones you have, as long as you can. I've got a chisel that's finished here. As long as you can create what I'm about to show you, you can finish off the sharpening on the oil stone. If you had a finer stone, you could probably get away with not doing the second stage of my technique, which I'll show you in a minute. Meaning that you could just do this next part here, which is just on the grinding wheel, and you'd be finished and you could use your chisels. My advice, however, would be to use the grinding wheel and then to use the oil stones like I'm about to show you. You'll notice as well, one side of this is missing because I'm in the process of actually putting a sanding wheel on this side. It will be a video in the future, but it's in the process of being modified, this machine. Okay, so the first thing that you need to pay attention to is the angle here. So we are either going to go for a more positive angle like that or a more negative angle like that. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set the table. I like to set it to about between 25 27 degrees. What most chisels come at when they are factory sharpened is 25 degrees. So quite often you can just loosen the table off, press it against that, and then eyeball it along that edge there and line it up to the wheel, tighten it up, and that's pretty much good enough for everyone. This is something, however, that you can improvise and experiment with yourself. As a general rule of thumb, the more aggressive the angle, so the more flat you get into the stone like that, the longer the chisel is going to stay sharp, but the less sharp it's going to be. And the more flat to the wheel you get, so the more this angle here, the more in this direction, the sharper it will be, but it won't stay as sharp for as long. So it's basically a balance between the two. Experiment with it yourself and see what you find works for you. Okay, so let's get straight into this, and I've got the table here, the little guiding table, set to the angle that we talked about before. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this surface of the chisel, the front end, flat on the table, and I'm just going to move it along the surface of the table. I'm going to use my finger here as a guide against this surface to just guide it along like that. I actually made this table myself, but most grinders come with some sort of a table, and my advice would be to put some sort of maybe it could be wood, it could be anything, and you want it so that the width of your chisel can extend beyond the grinding stone, so that you can start here, move across, start here, move across, and do that in that sort of motion. If you're going to work with just a small table here, then you're going to have the problem that your tool is going to be constantly touching the cutting wheel, and it's going to go blue on the tip, meaning that it's got too hot, and it will never be as good as it could be. And once it's gone blue on the tip, if it does go blue on the tip while you're grinding, what you have to do is then let it cool down, and you have to grind past that. So you have to grind off maybe however much it is, you'd have to grind that off, because that blue part on the tip is going to be soft and it's going to go blunt very quickly when you're working with it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the machine on. It's going to be loud, so what I'm going to do is I'll just put some nice music over the top here and show you the technique that I use to sharpen the chisels, and we'll take a look at them after. And there we go, that's what we're looking for there, a nice uniform cut on the front of the tip. I've got a square here, and I've put a square on it, made sure it's nice and square, like that. And it's not blue, but it has got, if you look along the tip here, it's got a slight burr along the edge here. And like I say before, if you had a finer stone on the front here, you could probably not have that. That probably wouldn't be there. But I've got this rough stone, it's okay for me, I can work with it. Like I say before, it's all about perfecting your own technique. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move over to the oil stone, and we're going to remove that burr there. Okay, so this is my oil stone. This is the only stone I use. It has two grits, so it has a finer grit on the top and a more aggressive grit on the top. I like to start on this side and then finish off on the other side. And as I said before, we have a slight burr on the front tip there, and you can see I've already sharpened this a couple of times. But the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to do the back, and we're just going to go up and down the stone like that, and we're aiming to get a polished edge on the tip here. We don't really care what goes on beyond the tip here, because if it has a concave back or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You don't very often use the back anyway on a chisel. What you do need, however, is the tip to be touching the stone and the tip to be able to be polished. And the next stage, once we've done that, is going to be to take advantage of this concave area that we made on the wheel, and by putting it on the wheel, you now have 2 points of contact. You can feel it touching on the back of the chisel and the leading edge, and you can feel where that perfect angle is. And what we're going to do then is we're going to use just freehand and no guides whatsoever. You're just going to go along the stone in a figure of 8. Sometimes you're going to go around the edges. It's very important when you've got a stone like this to try and keep it flat. And one of the main ways to keep it flat is to use the whole stone. If you just concentrate your work on one bit in the middle, you're going to eventually end up with a pit in the middle there. So you're going to want to try and eliminate that. Like I say, this is an oil stone, so I'm just going to put a few drops of oil on here. And the oil also helps to protect the chisels, which I like. Water is more likely to help them rust. Oil is more likely to protect them, so I prefer oil stones. And as you can see, I'm using the whole stone there. The whole stone is being used, and what you can do now is just wipe that off there, and you can see that the whole of the back is scratched. I know the back of my chisels are flat, but you might end up with just the tip scratched here and maybe along the back here, and in the middle will still be polished. That means that your chisel's got a hollow in it. Quite often, chisels, when they come from the manufacturers, they have hollows in them. The next stage, as I said before, put it on there, and then we're just going to slowly work our way around the stone. And because of that angle, you can really feel where it needs to be. And now you can see where it's been rubbing on the stone. So we've got scratches on the back here, and we've got a nice solid scratch along the front there, which is what we're looking for. It means we are touching in the right places. And I'm just going to keep doing that for a little while until I'm happy with what I've got, and then we'll flip the stone over. Okay, so at this stage I'm happy with what we've got, and I think we can move on to the next stage. We've not got rid of the burr yet, but we're going to get to it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip the stone over, give it a wipe off, put a few drops of oil on it, and this is the fine side of the stone. So this is where we're going to really perfect that leading cutting edge. And you're basically going to be doing the same thing with a couple of variations at the end. So to start with, we're just going to do the back. And this is very much like sanding a workpiece. You're basically getting rid of the scratches that you made in the previous action. Okay, so now you can really see that we're starting to polish the tip there. I'm just going to keep working at it, and then we'll get rid of that burr and we'll finish this off. Okay, so I'm happy with that. We could probably go a little bit more on this edge here, but we are pretty much polished all the way along there. So what I'm going to do now to get rid of the burr is I'm only going to run it along the stone in this direction, so the cut is always going to be pushing away from the leading edge. And I'm just going to do one side, flip it over, do the other side. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to be changing the angle of attack. So I'm going to start off at like a 45-degree angle to the stone, like this. And then I'm going to want to be finishing up at an angle like that. So I'm going to be running the edge, the stone perpendicular to the edge. One thing you can do is just use your finger along the back there and see if you can feel any burrs. Quite often, burrs that you can't see, you can actually feel with your finger. But this actually feels quite good at the minute. And that is pretty much it. That is now what I would call a sharp chisel. You can quite clearly see that we've polished this back edge, which has just pretty much acted as a guide. And the front leading edge is nice and polished. And there we have it. That's how to sharpen your chisels. That's how I sharpen my chisels anyway. And that is the advice that I'm giving to you. The most important thing, I think, is to, like I said before, perfect your own technique. You might not have the same machines or whatever as I do. Use whatever you have to your ability and sharpen it with what you have. But hopefully this video has provided you with a general sense of some of the things you have to look for, like the angle, making sure it doesn't go blue when you're grinding it, all them kind of things that you need to pay attention to when sharpening chisels. One thing I wanted to talk about was the back of the chisels. Now my backs are flat, but that is just because I brought fairly high quality chisels. You don't need to buy high quality chisels, and these ones in fact don't have a flat back. They are my torture chisels, I call them. But I will not flatten the back. There is no need for it. The only time you use the back is on very rare occasions where you really need to be straight and level. But for sharpening, on a sharpening point of view, all you need to have is the tip touch the stone. If you have a chisel that is rounded like that, that is a problem. That is a problem. Then you need to work on the stone and get it flat so that the tip is touching the stone when you put a constant pressure on it. But an angle like that, in that way, you're always going to have the tip touching the stone, and that is really all you need. Again, with regards to the angle of attack here, you can experiment with that. That is completely your own choice. I pretty much leave my chisels at about, I think it's 27 degrees. They come set at 25 normally, but I think I measured one once and it was like 27. But it's pretty much, do it however you feel is the best for you. So sharpen one, use it for a few weeks, see what you think, and then change the angle a little bit and then use it again. See if it's better or worse and see what you want. One thing to note, when you use an oil stone, make sure to clean your chisel once you've done that, because obviously you don't want oil getting on your workpiece, whatever it is you're working on. You don't want the oil getting on that, so you're going to want to make sure you clean them. And even if you use a water stone, be sure to clean your chisels as well, because even though you're using water, there will still be deposits of metal in that water which then can be transferred over to your workpiece, and you just don't want that. Another thing that I should mention as well is that you don't need to go to the grinder every single time. I only grind my chisels every now and then. If I've been doing some work and they've actually got like a ding in them, then I will grind that away. But if the edge looks nice and straight and whatnot, then I won't grind them. I will just sharpen them back up again on the oil stone. So I hope that helped you out. If it did, be sure to subscribe and like the video. That helps me out a lot. And I hope you find your technique for sharpening your chisels. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week.